right, hello everybody, and welcome to part 2 for the limited set review for Tarkir Dragonstorm. If for some reason you didn't watch part 1, where we talk about the Signpost Uncommons and the white cards, you'll see we have a guest. There's two of us here doing this. This is my friend Ryan. Would you like to introduce yourself again to the class?
Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm one of Nicole's Sanctum teammates. I'm also a limited junkie and a content creator. I do content on Patreon. I've done these set reviews with my roommate Maura before, and doing this one with Nicole. Yeah, will be and has
Again,
been fun.
yes. So these are nice and long, and so we're going to go ahead and just get started. We're going to look today at the commons and uncommons for blue, and then we'll also put black in this video if it's works out time-wise, so we'll see. All right, this is Humbling Elder. It's 1 blue for a creature, human monk, 1/2, that has flash. When this creature enters, target creature and opponent controls gets -2/-0.
This is going to humble a lot of people in the first week of the format when they forget to play around it.
Yes.
Um,
So there's
yeah.
a lot of things I like about this card. It reminds me very, very lightly of Howler's Heavy, which, if anyone has watched any of my drafts, they know that I love Howler's Heavy. I really am decently high on that card. This card's really cool. It slots into a lot of different decks in a lot of different ways. So it is a creature, a 1/2 for 1 mana, which is, fine rate in terms of power toughness. It has flash, so the -2/-0 can be used in a lot of ways in terms of like a combat trick. To make combat go a little bit better, not trade creatures as often, whatever it is. But it also has this really cool part of being able to be like a flash way to trigger the second spell cast of the like blue-red cast 2 spells per turn mechanic. So we haven't gotten to see a lot of these cards that have, this card gets this if you've cast 2 spells this turn. But this is a pretty cool way of enabling that. And so, how good those cards end up being, I think, is a big part of how highly you take this card, but I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is mainly a flurry card, like a cast 2 spells card. And I would say it's more of a combat trick than a creature. Like, I'm not that happy about a 1 mana 1/2 flash, but it's a pretty decent combat trick, on a body that like is gonna be something. It's, a real body on the board. So I'm not super high on this card, but I would land probably somewhere around like a 7 for it. It feels like kind of an average common. You're gonna want it more in the flurry decks, the Jeskai space, that kind of thing.
I actually think synergistically it's going to be valued a little bit higher than the other, commons. It just seems like it fits into, slots pretty decently into a lot of decks. I think it's probably going to be closer to like a 6.5. I'm not strong enough on this to say I wanted it at 6, but we've talked a lot about flexibility, and I think this is one of those cards that has a lot of options in terms of deck building.
Does feel like a Nicole card. Next, we've got Wingspan Stride. Single blue for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying. And for 2 and a blue, you can return this aura to its owner's hand. So I guess I was initially reading this as if you could return it from your graveyard to your hand, but that's not right, is it? It's only returning from the battlefield.
Yeah,
That
this is like if
makes me a
something is
lot lower on
blocking
this
you free
card.
mana, you can keep it. I think this
Yeah,
card's going to be close to unplayable.
I
Uh,
agree. Like you really the bounce thing can enable your flurry. Yeah, that's the joke. That's the thing it's doing. But like spending free mana on that is so much to spend. Like you're gonna have better ways to spend your mana in most limited decks. You really want single mana enchantment +1/+1 and flying if you're playing this card. And I don't think we want that very often in limited. It's fine rate, but you're just down a card when you use it. So you got to be really aggressive. I can't see this being good.
yeah, I am saving my 10s for like absolutely limited unplayable, but this one's probably like a
It's closest we've
9.5.
gotten. Yeah.
Yeah,
9, 10, somewhere in there, I think is right. Yeah,
not excited
agree.
about it. All right, this is Unending Whisper. This is 1 blue for a sorcery. Draw a card. It also has Harmonize, so for 5 and a blue, you can cast it for its graveyard from its Harmonize cost. I'll read Harmonize one more time for the sake of this being a different video, but it says, you may cast this card from your graveyard for its Harmonized cost. You may tap a creature you control to reduce that cost by X, where X is its power, and then you exile it, so sometimes you can cast it from your graveyard for You know, a reasonable cost. This is definitely for the two decks. You know, you're never that excited to put one blue draw card into your deck. But you know, it's kind of cool that you can exile it to draw a card again later. But I really think if you have things that reference wanting two spells and that's something you care about, then you're gonna want to play this card as like kind of a filler type card, but it's never gonna be something you prioritize super high.
I agree. Yeah, like tapping a creature for Harmonize is a real cost, and 6 mana is a lot, so you really need to tap a creature to have this be any kind of reasonable amount of mana on the, the Harmonize, the flashback. Uh, I'm not excited about this card. It does some synergistic things, like it's good at double spelling. Yeah, we kind of get that. It like crosses over in that synergy space. It removes a card from your yard to trigger those things. Okay. But like I'm kind of putting air into my deck when I'm putting this in my deck, and I normally don't want that. So I'm pretty low on it. I'd probably put it at like an 8, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. It's
Cool.
playable, but nothing gonna be too exciting.
Next up, we
All
have
right.
Ringing Strike Mastery. Single blue for an enchantment. When it enters, tap the enchanted creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's untap steps. This is just a 1 mana claustrophobia, but the enchanted creature also has 5 untap this creature. So interesting. We saw Singing Bell Strike, I think, in original cons, which was 1 in a blue, but then the creature had 6 and untap it for the same effect. And I think this is maybe slightly better. It's not full removal, but it's closer to removal than to like tap and stun something. And 1 mana is really cheap. It obviously is good with double spelling. I think this card's going to be fine, but I don't think it's going to be premium by any means. It'll definitely be better in more aggressive decks, I think. Although, controlling decks might use this as kind of a speed bump, cheap to keep the pressure off of you card, so it's not unplayable there, certainly. But I think this card is good when you want to generate tempo and sort of run your opponent over by like casting double spells in like a
Yeah,
big flurry.
especially in limited nowadays, there's so much to do with your mana all the time. So like, you know, it is a cost to have 5 on tap, but it's you don't really want your removal spell to be able to just like
Right, they can kind of
untap.
counter it once they get to a certain amount of mana. Yeah, and notably, like I think what mostly your opponents are going to want to do with this is pay 5 once and then just block with the creature, so they don't
Yeah.
have to keep paying the 5 and they'll get their card out of it. Like that does matter, you're removing most of the creature, but they can basically pay 5 later in the game to get like a really nice blocker most of the time. And so, yeah, I'm not super excited about this card. I'd give it probably like a 6. It's going to be
Yeah, 6
playable.
is
You're going to
about
play
where
it a
I'm
lot,
at.
but yeah.
It doesn't get rid of effects, which is something that's super notable. It doesn't make it like, a better removal spell. I think I'm gonna be pretty happy to have like one of these in my sideboard against like the mobilized decks and things, where this really like will set the aggressive decks behind. But it's not anything I'm gonna be prioritizing, I don't think. Okay, we have Agent of Codis, 1 and a blue for a 2/1 creature. It has got Renew, so this is the mechanic we were talking about earlier. Exile this card from your graveyard for 3 and a blue. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Activate only as a sorcery. So, I mentioned now a couple times that in limited nowadays, you always have a lot to do with your mana. Um, a 2/1 body, I think, is pretty underwhelming, especially in limited nowadays, and with all of these decks that are making, like 1/1s, like this can't even really block a mobilized token without trading off. And then 4 mana to put counters is, I think, decently expensive. Like you can do, we were talking about how like our 4 mana cards that make 2/2/2s are like, fine right nowadays. And so 2 counters, like even though you don't need an additional card to do it, I think I'm generally gonna be pretty excited to play this card. Maybe I'll play a copy if like I have a Kishla Skimmer or something where I really want to like trigger leaving the graveyard effects. But I think I'm probably generally underwhelmed.
I agree. I think this card's pretty underwhelming. Like the body is just not what you need on a 2 drop. It's never horrible. Like, it is a creature you can play on 2 and block with sometimes and attack with sometimes and gets a little bit of value later, but I agree. Like, I don't think this is going to be a card that you're excited about putting in your deck almost ever. So, yeah, I'd say like an 8 probably for me.
Yep, I agree. 8.
Cool. Next, Teamer Devotee. One in a blue for a 3/3 with Defender, and this is the part of the Devotee cycle for blue for Teamer. It has one and Teamer filtering, so it'll add blue, green, or red for you, fix you for those colors. I like the 2 mana 3/3 Defender body on this. Like, this is exactly the kind of card you want in your control deck. It will block, it will stabilize you, and it will fix your mana. Like, this is great. Not anything special, not anything that's like actively helping you win the game, but I like this card a lot. I think this is going to be one of Blue's better commons, probably.
Yeah, in a lot of the recent sets, they've put in these like 2 mana 3/3 defenders that have sort of like a effect that turns them into a non-defender creature. All of them have been very good. Stalked Researcher I thought was pretty good. Midnight Mangler was really like a pretty impressive card, I think, in the draft typically. And this one, while it doesn't have a way to like become aggressive, it does seem like blue is a color that spends a lot of mana, wants to play long games, and so a 3/3 defender seems super useful. And that body being on your filter seems great. I think this card's probably pretty good. I think I probably put it a little higher than the other filter one we've seen so far. The one that's in white, but that also might be color preference. Uh, like
No, I
just a
think I
slight step
agree.
above.
Like, the
If we have the other
card,
one a
the
5, I
vanilla
probably put this
test on
one
it, I
a
think
5.
is a little better. Yeah, I agree. I do want to note, like, you should not be playing this in your deck unless you're using the fixing most of the time. Sometimes you'll really need the defensive speed, but like, because this can't ever attack, it's almost always going to be a pretty bad as a creature. So you do really need to be like using the fixing. It's just, I know every deck you play, Nicole, will definitely use the fixing, and most decks I play will. And like, yeah, I think you can get a
In
lot
this
out of it.
format, it's definitely more valuable than it is in some others.
Exactly. Yeah.
This is a card that gets a pretty high rating in this set, but like if we were talking about any other set, Jason and I would be really excited about it.
Yep.
All right.
Next, we have Dispelling Exhale. One in a blue for an instant. As an additional cost to cast it, you may behold a dragon. Counter target spell unless its controller pays 2. And if a dragon was beheld, counter that spell unless its controller pays 4 instead. So it's, the basic, like, what is it called? Quench effect that we get a lot in Limited these days. It's counter unless they pay 4 if you have a dragon, which is essentially a 2 mana counter spell in Limited almost all of the time. Um, yeah, these effects kind of range in how good they are between limited formats. I'm not sure how to evaluate this one.
Yeah, I think the more that we've looked at the set, granted we haven't looked at rares yet, and I'm sure there's a lot of dragons in the dragon set at rare. But we've seen like one omen in dragon in each individual color pair, and then we'll see how many there are in multicolors. But looking at the signpost uncommons, I don't think we actually looked. I don't think any of them were dragons.
I
So I
agree.
think
Yeah.
in limited, my general impression is that you should be treating this as a card where you're not beholding a dragon, and that's just like similar to the other behold card we talked about. It's just like something that occasionally happens, and if you do, then the card is like a little bit better. I'd say these counterspell effects, like we said, they range format to format between like a 6 and a 7. You never take them like super highly, but there are some sets where they're like a little bit more premier than other sets. With this set having a lot of what I'm assuming because of the name of the set, like bigger dragons, I imagine it'll be a little bit better in this set than like the average limited set. And so I'm anticipating this to be around a 6.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah, I'm good going with the 6. I tend to like this kind of effect. It's really good just to have something to do on turn 2 in your more controlling deck, and it will usually be relevant later in the game. You'll be able to get a card out of it, so I'm happy with the 6.
Great. All right. High Spire Bellringer. This is 2 and a blue for a 1/4 with flying. And it says the second spell you cast at each turn costs 1 less. I think it's fine. 1/4
It's
is
fine.
a fine blocking body, I guess. It flies, but most of the time with flying, you want your creature to have slightly more power rather than slightly more toughness. Just because they've got that evasion to get a little bit of extra attacking in. Um, a card that I'm probably going to be fine to have if my deck really cares about the second spell thing. The thing is, I just don't think any deck where it requires you to play 2 spells in a turn, I don't think they're going to come together very often. This feels like, if you're the one drafter at the table that's playing this archetype, maybe it's pretty good. But Other than that, I think it's gonna be pretty underwhelming. I think I'd probably put this card like an 8.
I agree. I'm even maybe at like a 9 with this card. I would call it like fine derogatory, where 3 mana 1/4 flyer is never going to be horrible, but it's also just like never going to be something that you really want and isn't going to be like actively making your game stronger. And I'm very unexcited about playing this card for its ability, where like it might save you a mana every now and then, but most of the time, like I want my cards that do well with double spelling to do well with double spelling on their own, and this doesn't really do that. Like, okay, it lets you cast 2 spells in a turn, but then you need another card that sort of pays you off for doing that. Yeah, I'm pretty low on this card, I would say.
Yeah,
For
if you look
anyone,
at
oh yeah,
we've talked about like precedent a fair bit, or I've talked about precedent a fair bit. If you compare this to like cards from any other set that have cost reduction effects, typically they're for like a specific card type or something. The one you could think about from like last set is Quick Welder, which is the 2/4 that makes artifacts cost less. And if you thought about it, like you only wanted to play that card if you had X amount of artifacts. Like it really needed to impact the speed of the deck. And this one, it doesn't impact your first spell ever. And so I think it's just not going to be impactful enough.
I agree. Fun fact, this is essentially the same effect as one of the cards in my battle box, which is an uncard called Cheap Ass, which makes your spells cost half a mana less to play. This is essentially the same thing as that. Your second spell is going to cost 1 less, but yeah, that ability I don't think is very strong, and the
All right,
body
we
is not
understand.
impressive.
I Spire Bellringer's a cheap ass. You'll never forget it.
Next up, we have Sibsig Appraiser, 2 and a blue for a 2/1. Not an impressive body, but check out the ability. When this creature enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. Organ Hoarder is back, baby! Let's go.
They took
Um,
away the name. They knew I lost too many organs.
um, this card's great. Really, really strong. Like 3 mana for a body and a card with selection. That's incredible. I really like this card.
Yeah,
Seagate
especially when there's
Oracle
things
is
that
a
are
1
relevant
3.
to having things in your graveyard.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is, a Sultai card clearly, like with the flavor, and it plays really well in the Sultai space in this set. Plays well with Teamer and Harmonize. Card's great. Um, I guess it also plays well with Jeskai with double spelling. Like you can certainly use this to find your second spell on like a late game turn. Uh, I'm probably giving this like a 4, maybe. I don't think it's actively making your deck incredible, but I could even see it going up to a 3. Like this is just a really pushed card.
Yeah, I agree that it's pushed. I think I'm probably closer to a 5, only because like they have nowadays like really pushed value on spells. Like there's a lot of cards that I think give you a lot of value, and at 3 mana, against like a lot of aggressive decks, a lot of the time, like this being a 2/2 body would have been a huge difference than a 2/1, for example, with like mobilize and stuff. As great as this card is value wise and as it is at setting it up, I think you know, especially in value decks, you want your first couple of turns to kind of stabilize you. Make sure that you're okay against the aggro deck to just get value for the rest of the game. And this one is, I think, just like a step behind me wanting to take it as highly as like a 3 or a 4. But it's still obviously a great card, and I'm happy to take it. All right, I like the art on this card. Snow Melt Stag. This is 3 and a blue for a 2/5 creature with vigilance. During your turn, this creature has base power and toughness 5/2, and then for 7 mana, it can't be blocked this turn. That was a wild ride reading this card.
Such a weird one.
Yeah, this card's super weird. I think it's probably gonna be generally worth very little. Like, I don't think we're gonna rate this card very highly. The most comparable card in the last set is Gear Seeker Serpent, which was, cost reduced sometimes, but it was a good effect for it to not be able to be blocked in that format specifically because the format went to board stalls so often. And so, it is pretty format dependent how good this card is. At a 2/5 with Vigilance, it is a pretty good blocker on your opponent's turn. And, I don't imagine prior to making it unblockable, it's going to be able to attack a whole lot at a 5/2. It might make your opponent keep a creature back to block it or something, but I don't anticipate it being super impactful. I think I wouldn't go as far as calling it a 9. It's probably a fine filler card. Like an 8.5 is my guess.
Yeah, I'm comfortable giving this like an 8. Like sometimes it'll be a good blocker in your controlling decks. It does weirdly pressure them into leaving back blockers, which can be a form of defense, I guess, sometimes. Best defense is a 5-2 on offense. And then it will like close out a game if you both are board stalled and you have a lot of mana and like can close out, them from 10 over a couple turns. But nothing special. 8, 9, somewhere in there. You don't need to
I
prioritize
agree.
this card. Next, we have Riverwalk Technique, 3 in a blue for an instant. This is one of those blue removal spells they print at common in most sets, so choose one. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it on their choice of the top or bottom of their library. That's like the typical effect we see. And then the little bonus you get for this specific card this set is you can also choose to counter target non-creature spell instead if you want. Um, Interesting card. This removal spell is usually pretty good, I would say, in blue. Uh, it can be easy to think of it as bounce, but it's really more like removal. You are taking away their draw step, so it's a 1-for-1 in terms of cards, and it's getting rid of a creature on board at instant speed, so it's basically a removal style effect. And then this card can counter a really important removal spell or a big like there's Jeskai Revelation. There's like these big clan flavored rare spells that are super good. This can nab those. I think this card's going to be pretty good. I don't think you'll need to like pick it super highly, maybe, but you'll put it in most of your blue decks, I would say, and you'll want like one, maybe two. I like probably a 7 for this. Feels like a pretty average common, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. Like Ryan said, they print one of these effects in most sets nowadays, and they really range at how good they are. Like I think I remember talking to Jason, we were like pretty high on the one that was in Duskmourn. We liked the one from Duskmourn, but the one that was in Aether Drift, I think like I'm now at the point where I'm almost upset if I play it, and
I
so it really
agree.
ranges. This one does have a pretty notable second effect stapled onto it. Counter target non-creature spell. While it doesn't come up often, when it does come up, it probably like is changing the outcome of the game. And so having one of these as something to like, kind of hold in your back pocket doesn't seem so bad. These always really depend on how the format plays out. They range from I think like a 5 in the best of sets to like a 9 in the worst of sets. So I'm gonna go ahead and say 7. It might end up being closer to like a 6 in this set just because, or at least I anticipate there being a lot of expensive cards. And, whenever you can put an expensive thing on the top or bottom, it matters. And it's really going to set back like a lot of mobilized decks. Um, so I anticipate it being a little better in this set, but, you know, all
Are you,
context.
are you saying it's good against mobilized because you can get their mobilized creature?
I think so, yeah. Because then their
Okay.
mobilized creature will enter. Most of the mobilized creatures don't have haste. And
Hmm.
so, they'll attack. You can get the mobilized creature. You deal with the tokens for a turn, but then they have to replay it and wait another turn before they attack.
That's
It seems
true.
like that will slow them down
Yeah.
significantly.
I don't know if I agree just because I think most of the mobilized creatures are cheap and sort of the bodies they make are sort of part of their stats to some extent. I don't see that as much different from targeting like a normal cheap creature, but I see what you're saying. Like it can sort of time walk them to some extent.
Yeah, and
This
it also
removal
gives
spell
you
is
time
good
to
at
like
time
put a
walking them.
blocker out so they can't attack with them as well. Or like I feel like it can save you a fair amount of damage because I think the mobilized cards we've seen so far are have been able to be a little push on the amount of damage they can do in the early turns because the tokens get sacrificed. Um, And so, getting rid of the creature can I think can save you a fair bit of damage, at least in
Okay.
instincts.
Yeah. Next, we
I
have
don't remember
Ice
who started
Ridge.
it.
It's all good. I'm happy to just default to whoever kind of remembers it first.
All
So
right, you got it.
Ice Ridge Serpent, 4 and a blue for a mana war. 3/3. Whenever this creature enters, return target creature an opponent controls to its owner's hand. I like it. Uh, these effects can also kind of vary a little bit in how good they are in Modern Limited. We saw a really pushed one at Uncommon in Aether Drift that was a 4/4 that also did something with speed. This is definitely worse than that, but that card was incredible. this card seems merely good to me. I'd probably say it's like an average common, somewhere around like a 7 is where I'm
Yeah,
landing.
I agree. That's about where I'm at. They improve a little bit. Just some things, when you're starting a set and you want to talk about how you evaluate cards, like where we kind of come to our numbers. If there are sets that have a lot of tokens, now Mobilize does not count for this because they sacrifice. But like, you know, things that come to mind, there's like Hopeful Vigil and Wilds of Eldraine that makes a 2 mana 2/2. That's a lot of play. This one has the 4 mana make 2/2/2s. Like if there are a lot of mechanics that make tokens in a set, these are always a little bit better because you're getting rid of the token entirely. They can't go back to the hand. I don't think we've seen a whole lot of this in this set.
There is
Um,
a Teamer card that makes 5/5 elephants, which this is
ooh,
incredible against.
yeah,
But yeah, I think most of the token stuff going on is mobilized, which this doesn't work against. So, if anything, I mean, we've seen a couple of those nights, but like, I think this will probably be a token light set if you don't count mobilize. I guess there's the spirits from Endure. So maybe not. Maybe there will be a good amount of tokens to get. I don't
yeah. I think
know.
I like a 7. It's just an interesting
Yeah.
thing for you to think about. Like when you're thinking about a new set, it's kind of when these cards vary from being like a 6 to a 7 to an 8. They're never premier, but sometimes they're a little bit better than others.
Yep.
All right. This card is called Focus the Mind, something I could listen to a little bit more often. 4 and a blue for an instant. It costs 2 less to cast if you've cast another spell this turn. Draw 3 cards, then discard 1.
It's pretty strong. I
This is
mean,
my kind of card.
yeah, that's much better than a divination, especially in a set with some graveyard synergies. And for 5 mana at instant speed, you're not super sad if you have to cast this. If you can pass, let's say, leave up your Riverwalk dance or whatever it's called, and if they don't do anything that you want to counter or you want to remove, you can cast this instead. That's pretty nice. Um, and yeah, you'll probably be able to fit it in for 3 mana, trigger your flurry stuff at some point, and it fuels the rest of your flurry too. So this is probably one of the stronger cards for the flurry deck, and I would say I'm playing it in like most other decks as well.
Yeah,
Every deck can cast a 2 drop and then play this on turn 5. It's not that hard.
I agree. I think I've got it around a 4, would be my guess.
I like it. Yeah, I think depending on like how slow and how much you value card advantage the format is, I could see it being anywhere from like a 4 to a 7, and so I'm leaning closer to 4, but I'd probably put it at like a 5 just to be a little conservative with it. I think there's a lot to do with your mana unlimited, so I don't think you need to like prioritize this that highly ever, but it's a very strong card. So I think
Yeah.
I'm on a
From
5,
what
but I
it
think 4 is reasonable.
From what it looks like so far, the blue cards at common at base don't seem like they're like really what you want to be building your deck around. So we talked about support colors, base colors. It does seem like blue might be a support color. This is a very strong support card. Like if
Yes.
are playing like 1 blue mana and you get to like occasionally do this to refill your hand, I think that's pretty strong.
Yep.
Gives it a little bit more flexibility, I guess.
Yeah. So this is our Omen Dragon for blue. So the dragon half is 6 mana for a 4/4 flying ward 2, 5 and a blue. Um, so that's like a reasonably strong card when you get to 6 mana and can cast it. The ward is really nice to prevent you from getting blown out. And then the Omen is 1 and a blue for an instant, tap up to 1 target creature, draw a card. That's also somewhat nice. Like it'll prevent an attacker for a turn and cycle or cantrip. And it obviously helps you double spell. That's kind of part of what's going on there as well. Get a little bit of tempo while you're doing it. I like both halves of this card. I think neither of them are that special. They're not really quite on rate, but when you have the option between the two of them, it sort of becomes like totally fair rate, I think. And you'll
Yeah.
have cards that care about having dragons. So this is like exactly an average common for me. I'd give it like a 7.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything you said. One of the interesting things that I'm thinking about now that we've read more of these cards is there's a lot of, the colors in Jeskai both reference 2 spells per turn, the red white ones being obviously a little bit more aggressive. We haven't seen too many of the ones that are like in blue red, but I think what's interesting is a lot of the blue cards that, draw a card or whatever are at instant speed when we're looking at them in blue. And so it'll be interesting to see how often like this 2 spell mechanic might be a lot stronger than it initially reads if, there's many cards where it's good if you cast 2 spells on your opponent's turn, because it definitely seems like it's possible to do that in this set. Not that it'll happen a whole lot, but if it can happen one turn and it really impacts your opponent, then that kind of gives you an idea of how you can balance the entire mechanic.
Yep.
So that's
There's
something
that
I'm
white
thinking about
common
seeing
that
stuff like
tap
this.
creatures. Like that's a little bit
Yeah.
more relevant on their turn. If we see more of those, yeah, something to note. Good call.
All right, Dragon Storm Forecaster. This is 1 blue for an 0/3. Search your library for a card named Dragon Storm Globe or Boulderborn Dragon. Reveal it. Put it in your hand and then shuffle. Is there a chance that, Ryan, you made the spreadsheet that if I go either more than
Unfortunately,
that,
no,
we can read you?
I didn't foresee that. I
Thankfully,
think
I
I
do
know
have
what
Skyfall
those
open,
cards
so
do. Yeah.
I can
Neither of
search
them are
them.
very good, spoiler alert.
All right, Dragonstorm Globe is a 3 mana artifact. Oh, it's the mana rock. It's a 3 mana or a mana rock. Each dragon you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter. So this looks like it's a dragon tribal type thing, and then Boulderborn Dragon is 5 mana for a 3/3 artifact creature with flying and vigilance whenever it attacks surveil 1. This seems like it is a card that is there for the flavor win. It does not seem like it's particularly good. If you get a deck with a lot of dragons and you like a mana rock, maybe you'll want this, but I don't think it's
So you
something you're
see,
picking
if you
highly.
put all these bad cards in your deck, they can really, with their powers combined, become only mildly bad. I'm not excited
There's
about it
something
at
else like
all.
this that they've printed recently, I think, that I can't remember what set it was, but it ended up being better. Oh, maybe it's in Karlov. I think it's in Karlov. I just
Hmm.
can't remember what it is.
Yeah, I think I know
Um,
vaguely what you're talking about, but I don't remember
and I
what it was
remember it being
called.
a little better than I anticipated it being. Oh, it got clues. It's a blue
Yeah.
card. It was better in that set than I anticipated it being, but I still don't anticipate this one to be
Like,
good.
2 mana draw a card on a 1 mana 0/3 body is good. It's just that the cards you're drawing are bad and you have to put them in your deck to play this card. That doesn't add up to a card that I think I would bet that I never put this in my deck in the entire format. But maybe I'll have one deck that is playing like two of the Manolith, the Dragonstorm Globes, and base blue, and I sort of just put this in because I happen to want to play those cards too, and this card's fine if I have two of those. Um, but like I'd put the over under on me playing this card in my deck in this format at like 1.
Okay, but hear me out. It's kind of fixing.
This is the classic Nicole argument. This one I actually would count as fixing. I mean, you
Yeah,
play it on
like it
turn
does,
one, you tutor up on turn two, and you play your
and you
Manolith
get
on
a
turn
mana rock.
three.
So I
Yeah.
think, okay, my answer has changed. That I think most of the time you don't want it. I don't think it's unplayable. I do think there are decks where, like, if you have the mana rock and you want to play expensive things, and your fixing is just a little shy or something, then I might be okay playing this for the to search the fixer. And then if I'm already playing it to search the fixer, then I might as well play one copy of this dragon.
This is definitely a Nicole quote. This counts as fixing card.
All right.
Okay. Next, veteran ice climber. One in a blue for a 1/3 vigilance that can't be blocked, and whenever it attacks, up to one target player mills cards equal to this creature's power. Weird card.
Coming
I
off the
think
last set, I want this to be so good. I've
I
had so
know.
much fun milling my opponents in Aether Trade.
I think Riverturn Monument is a little bit better than this card. I will put that out there. Um, this, I think, most of the time you're going to want to mill yourself. In like Sultai space, in Teamer space, you want to like mill over those cards you can use from your graveyard. But how good is 2 mana 1/3 Vigilance Unblockable?
I think it's
Fine.
probably better in this set than it would be on average, just because like black greens, like if you're in Sultai, that's the +1/+1 counters archetype, and then a lot of the effects that renew, like exile from your graveyard, they also add counters. And when you have a creature that can't be blocked that also gets bigger, it gets a lot scarier. I will note we
Yeah,
are in the uncommons. Just before I forget and I'm reading cards and I'm like, wow, this seems like a pushed common.
good call.
I think this card is. It's gonna be super dependent on how the format plays out. I don't think every deck is gonna want it. My guess is I'm gonna be valuing it around a 6, but I could see it being lower than that. That's probably like the highest I value this card.
Yeah, I agree. I think you really want ways to pump this or to like make it really like more valuable than just what it is on its base. And so not every deck will want it for sure, but there probably will be some decks where it's like actively quite good. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think six. I might give it like a seven because I think in most decks like you're probably not going to want it very much, but yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I think the reason I give it a 6 is I feel like it is better than most of like the average commons we've talked about.
It's got upside for sure, which I think
Yeah,
can make you
exactly.
value a card higher in the draft. Yeah, I agree.
All right. Fresh start. This is 1 and a blue for a flash enchantment aura. Enchanted creature gets -5 -0 and loses all abilities. Interesting. Have they printed a
Interesting.
card like this before?
It's like an unable to scream kind of effect, sort of.
Kind of, I guess. Unable to Scream was great. But it was 1 mana. And it turned it into an O2, so like it wasn't a particularly good blocker, but it didn't have flash. Um, I have a difficult time evaluating this card. I think that a big part of it is going to be how good. I've said this a lot, but like how good the removal. When I say how good the removal is in this set, I think I'm mostly thinking about the removal that doesn't require any sort of. I forget what the word for it is. There's a word we should always use. Like they kill everything and they don't have
Conditional?
any upside. Sorry, what'd you say?
Conditional is what you're talking about?
Conditional. Yeah, yeah. How much conditional removal there is. If there's like a lot of non-conditional removal in the set, then, I think conditional removal like this is a little worse. But if there's not a lot of non-conditional removal and there's, cards with crazy bodies, this gets a little bit better. My guess is this is going to be somewhere around a 5 or a 6. Like not a premier removal spell you're picking highly, but something that you might want to have removal in your deck. That's just my guess.
I agree. Yeah, I think this is going to be like it kind of makes up for the downsides of not being like a full removal spell with the upsides of like having flash, potentially being like a tricky combat trick, helping you double spell. There's like seems to be kind of a blue flash theme, like there often is, where you get to leave up your card draw spell in this. This sort of goes well with that card draw spell because it keeps pressure off of you and is the other spell for you to like use your card draw. Um, I don't think it's anything special, but I think it's going to be a card that you very often play and sometimes even prioritize pretty highly. So I'd say like yeah, five or six somewhere around there, 5.5. I'm good with. Next we have Ureni's Rebuff. One in a blue for a sorcery. Return target creature to its owner's hand and harmonize for 5 in a blue. So this is the modern day silent departure, I guess you could say. Uh, Interesting. I don't know how to feel about this card.
It's not getting me very excited. So I think the thing
Yeah,
about these, like, I've talked a lot about these blue value decks where you want to kind of like stabilize the first couple of turns, and you know, then you outvalue your opponent. It's like an interesting gameplay thing where, in order to do that, you do need to be able to outvalue your opponent once you've stabilized. And things that just like return creatures to hand for 2 mana, like that's not really what I want to be doing. Like you're losing a card to return a creature, but they can just play it again the following turn. Like it's not really helping you stabilize or getting you ahead on cards. I think I'm probably pretty low on this card.
I think I'm a little bit higher than you are. Like, did you play original Innistrad? I forget if that's
I
when
did
you
play
started.
a
Okay.
on
Sa-
Strad.
Silent Departure was quite good and like I think surprisingly good for sort of how it looked. And I think there might be something similar going on here where like just the amount of mana advantage you get out of this can really matter. Even if you need to tap a creature, I still think like you might just slow your opponent down so much that you're getting more of that back. But I agree. I don't think it's ever going to be like premium. I think it might just be like more playable than you think. So I don't know. I'd maybe put this at like six, seven, somewhere in there. I
Yeah,
think
I
it
think
might
it
be a
was
little
around
better
an
than the
8.
average common.
I do remember Silent Departure. I think Magic, is just it's a lot stronger than it used to be.
A 2025
Um,
argument that could be real.
yeah,
Yeah,
and Harmonize is like this is an expensive Harmonize cost, and so I don't know. It just doesn't excite me, but maybe I'll be proven wrong.
fair enough.
All right,
This one excites you.
Roiling Dragonstorm. This is one I'm quite interested in. It's an enchantment. It's 2 mana, which means you can talk about playing in an Esper Pixie. It's a 1 and a blue. When this enchantment enters, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. And then whenever a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. This is going to be a how often you can pick things up and put them down argument. If you've got, I don't think I'm excited to play like draw 2, discard a card, unless I'm going to be playing it several times in a game. Even like playing it twice makes it, if you can do it consistently, makes it a little bit better. Like maybe I want to have a copy in my deck, but unless I'm like playing several dragons or I have like the card that bounces things, I think this is not crazy exciting to me.
I don't
It just doesn't
know.
impact the board.
I'm a little bit more excited. I think like 2 mana is not that much. If you don't have anything else to do on turn two, this is a pretty nice play to just like smooth out your draw. Blue has 2 graveyard decks, so the discard is pretty nice. So you discard a Harmonize or I forget what the Sultai ability is, but one of those cards.
Renew.
A renew card. Uh, and like I'm pretty happy if I trigger this once, I think. Like draw 2, discard 1 is a very real effect, especially in the late game. And I don't know. I think this card might just be sweet. I'm putting it at like a mm, probably not a 4, maybe a 5, 4.5, somewhere in there. I think this might be like a
So
pretty premium card.
I think this is a fun adventure in how good you want your bounceable spells to be. I was already at a 5. This just was like it wasn't a 3 for me.
Got it, got it.
So I
Okay.
think like I generally value effects like this pretty highly. So I guess I wanted a little bit more for a card that was going to be super powerful. But I'd say about a 5 is where I'm putting this card.
Cool. Next we have Kishla Trawlers, 2 and a blue for a creature, and when it enters, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. When you do, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. So this is a card that you're usually not going to be able to play on turn three and use the ability, but it will be a really nice card to play later in the game on like turn six, maybe when you've traded off a creature, used a spell, and it basically just draws you a card, which is super sweet. Good at double spelling to some extent in the late game. Good with all the like stuff that discards cards, gets cards into your graveyard for free. Uh, I think this is a pretty sweet one. I'm not going to go too high because it's only really actively like a good card in the late game, but I like this card. I think it'll be a card you kind of do want to prioritize. I'm giving it like a 5 probably. How about you?
Yeah, I'm at about a 5. I could see it being a 6. The reason being that I feel like a lot of the cards we've looked at so far that have been removal, like specifically in blue, have been enchantments, rather than like instants or sorceries. So like if you think about Gastral Thrill, whatever, from the last set, where the card, removed a instant or sorcery from your opponent's hand. A lot of the times you'd cast it, and your opponent just didn't have instants or sorceries. So I think that Magic has moved away from playing as many instants and sorceries in your deck. So blue definitely does have them, but there's a chance that this card ends up being a little worse than it reads initially, just because of the lack of instants or sorceries. But if you have enough instants and sorceries that you're excited to get with this, I think it's around a 5.
I would say, yeah, there is an asymmetry there where like you can control that part of it by putting more in your deck, whereas Gastel, whatever it was called, I also forget, like that, you had no control over it and you just didn't have the information and you had to play it without knowing whether it was going to get you another card or not. This, you have full control over that. And I think that matters a lot. We're rating it
Yeah,
obviously
yeah.
higher than
It
you
was
rate
just
that card, but yeah.
it's just more of an argument that there are less instants and sorceries in decks than like there have been maybe a year ago or something.
Yeah, is that true?
I
Maybe.
don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we could see and maybe
We'll
do
see.
some math, but yeah. I
All
think you're
right.
right though. In this set, you're correct. That observation of like not a lot of the blue removal spells are instants and sorceries. You might need to find them in other colors.
Yeah, and it's a 3-color set, so you might be totally fine. It's just I anticipate the card being a 5, but maybe it gets knocked down a step if it's a little more difficult in the set or something. All right, we have Wing Blade Disciple. This is a 3-mana 2/2 flyer, and it's got Flurry. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, make a 1/1 white bird creature token with flying. Finally, something that makes Flurry exciting. I
Does
love
it
making
though?
one-ones.
I don't know. I'm not super excited about this payoff.
Oh, I am.
Okay. How many 1/1
I love
flyers are
making
you
one-ones.
making to like make this a really actively good card?
I mean, I'm picturing a deck that does this double spell thing well.
Uh-huh.
We talked about like possibly being able to do them at instant speed, whatever it is. And if you're talking about like the other set of colors that fits these well is Jeskai, red, white having a couple of effects and possibly being a little bit more aggressive. If this is the card that you end up getting where you get a bunch of like little flyers, I think a lot of those other cards end up a lot better. It's not that I'm taking this at like a 3 or a 4 or anything. Like it's not Gremlin Tamer. We were taking Gremlin Tamer super high because it made like a 1/1 basically every turn. But I think this is like Gremlin Tamer light. Like if I was taking Gremlin Tamer at like a
Okay.
2, I'm taking this card at like a 5, would be my guess.
Okay. I think I am a little bit lower on it. I think I need to get like maybe 3 flyers out of it before I'm like actively really happy, and that just feels so hard to enable. And
Interesting.
I
It
don't
seems
love
like
the
they built a
body.
set to do that, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. It depends on like how much you trust the designers to like have really let you kind of do that in a very enabled way. I'm a little bit lower on it, maybe, just like the ability to sort of do this every turn. Um, I don't know. I'm staking a little bit of a claim here. I think this card is going to be like not that premium. I'm going to give it like a 7. Um,
Okay.
yeah, you'll play it sometimes, but I'm a little skeptical, I will say.
Okay. That makes sense too with the like claim that blue is probably going to be more of a support color.
That's true, yeah. Next, we have Essence Anchor, 2 and a blue for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, surveil 1. And then it has tap, create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. Activate only during your turn and only if a card left your graveyard this turn. This is a fascinating one. This is a definitely like a build around, and very much
Yeah.
in the blue like graveyard harmonize and I keep forgetting what the Sultan mechanic is called. You're gonna have to remind me again. That space, uh,
Renew.
renew. So the harmonize renew space. I think it will be really good sometimes, and I think there will be a lot of decks that just don't want it. Like 2 and a blue upkeep surveil 1. That card's almost playable. Like that's a powerful effect. I think 2 and a blue is a little bit too much to spend for it, but it's close to being good. And then if you make like 2 zombies, I'm quite happy. It's hard to do that because cards leaving your yard is not something that's like trivial to make happen. But it doesn't cost any mana, so like you're just getting it whenever that happens. Yeah, I'm pretty high on this. It's like a build around. I think a lot of decks won't play it, but I think some decks will actually really like it. So I'd give this like a 5, probably.
Yeah,
What are
that's
your
about where I'm at.
thoughts?
I think they're not remotely close to the same card, but it gives me like Essence Reliquary vibes, where like I think
Yeah.
most people will not value this card particularly highly, and so it's going to give you the opportunity to get it. And if you get it, you're going to be able to build like probably pretty cool, really strong build arounds around it. 5 sounds about right to me. Like you don't have to take it highly, but it might get past kind of late and be stronger than people anticipate it being.
In pack 3, you might take this as a 2.
Yeah. All right. We have Aegis Sculptor. 3 and a blue for a 2/3 flying Ward 2 creature. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile 2 cards from your graveyard. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Um, this card's interesting. I don't think
Yeah.
it's going to be anything too impressive. From what we've read so far, it feels like this set's going to be pretty synergistic. Um, and this doesn't necessarily, like, aside from having cards in your graveyard, feel like it's a particularly strong synergy piece. Like maybe it's better if the deck is Sultai and has a lot of like black green counters or anything. But it's like pretty fine at base. My guess is like somewhere around a 6 maybe. Maybe a little lower than that.
Yeah, it's not a great blocker the turn you play it, but it becomes a pretty good one after a turn cycle. That's not great. Like you do want your 4 drops to be able to block pretty effectively. It's fine. It's not horrible at it, but it's not great. But I do think, like the card we just saw, there are going to be some synergies for removing cards from your yard, and this does that in a way that like is also a somewhat compelling card if you just have a bunch of cards in your graveyard over a longish game. It is kind of anti-synergy though too, because you are going to have to remove your like flashback spells at some point. Um, yeah, it's a weird one. I think six is right where I would land too. I think like yeah, it's gonna be okay in some decks, and it's gonna be like not very good in a lot of decks.
Yeah, I picture there being like a really cool build around where you're playing like Kishla Skimmer with this Essence Anchor card that we just looked at, and then like this, like the value of this card goes up if you have Essence Anchor or Kishla Skimmer or something like that. It doesn't do a whole lot of base, but I think it's an interesting card. You're gonna know when you want it, I think.
Notably, there's a lot you need to enable those. Like you need those, and you also need cards that get stuff in your yard. So like it really has to be your whole deck is kind of going in this direction, which is why we're saying it's like a build around.
I agree.
Next, we've got Constrictor Sage, 4 and a blue for 4/4. When it enters, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it. And then it has Renew, 2 and a blue, exile this card from your graveyard, tap target creature an opponent controls and put a stun counter on it, activate only as a sorcery. This is great. Like, 4 and a blue, 5 mana for a 4/4 is just below the vanilla test, but being able to tap something and stun it, I think brings it like right back up to being totally on rate, maybe even actively good for a 5 drop. And the renew ability is super sweet too. Like if this ever dies, you just get kind of a free effect from your graveyard that synergizes with stuff like we were just talking about. This card's great. I'm really excited about it.
I agree. Yeah, this card's cool. I think I'm putting it like about a 4 would be my guess. Like if you're already in a blue deck that's going kind of slow, maybe I'm valuing it a little higher. But it seems like a pretty sweet card. Happy to draft it.
I agree. 4 is exactly where I put it.
All right, we have Bewildering Blizzard. This is 6 mana for an instant. It does a 2 blue in the mana cost. Draw 3 cards. Creatures your opponents control get -3/-0 until end of turn. This card's super interesting. Initially, I was going to be like 6 mana. Why are we playing 6 mana draw cards? But the -3/-0, it's like kind of like 6 mana draw 3 fog
Right.
almost.
It's like draw 4 and one of them is a 0 mana fog.
Yeah. Um, so I think I'm gonna be, decently happy to play one of these in a blue deck. I don't think you're ever gonna want any more than one. 6 mana is pretty expensive, but as a way to refill for like your double spell things to finish the games off, or get some value, and you can possibly get some good blocks against an aggro deck. I think this card's cool. I'm probably putting it at about a 5. Would be my guess.
I agree with everything you said about the card up until the 5, because I think this card is exactly as good as you described, but because you only ever want to play one, you never have to pick it that highly, even though it's an uncommon. So I'd put it at like a 7, maybe, but I think it's like as good as a 5, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think 6 is probably where I'm actually going to value taking it if I'm already in blue. And I'm just not taking it very highly, like early in drafts.
It is
So
true
yeah,
that it's an uncommon, so like when you see it, you won't know if you'll see another one. So maybe if your deck really wants that kind of effect, then you might just need to take it there. So yeah, I think
yeah.
6 is like also pretty reasonable.
All right. We are going into our last blue card.
Yes. This is Spectral Denial. X and a blue for an instant. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature you control with power 4 or greater, and it is a syncopate style effect, so it counters target spell unless its controller pays X. These cards I think are usually pretty good and limited. It's been a long time since we've seen one from what I can remember, but the flexibility is really nice. There will often be turns where your opponent just spends all their mana to tap out for a spell, and this ends up being just a 2 mana counter spell on those turns, sometimes even a 1 mana counter spell if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, which I don't think will be very common, but will come up sometimes. And then like later in the game, if this is the last spell in your hand and you just need to like pass the turn and counter whatever they play, this sort of also does that because you can tap out and just make them pay 6 mana and they can't pay 6 mana after they've cast a spell. So
Yeah.
I think this like it gets the job done, to quote a Chapel Roan song.
Yeah. Especially with like a double spell mechanic in the set. double spell mechanics mean that you're frequently going to be tapping a lot for, or tapping out for the second spell, and the second spell, at least in like the blue-red archetype, is the one that does the thing typically, I think. And so I think this card will be pretty good. I'm anticipating it being like a 3 or a 4 would be my guess, depending on how good counterspells end up being.
I might put it a little lower. I'd give it like a 5. Like I think it's going to be one of the blue commons you want more than the other ones, but I don't think it's going to be something you're taking over an uncommon almost like ever. But yeah, somewhere in there.
All right. Okay, I stopped the recording for the commons and uncommons. I do think I might post 2 videos a day, but make them separate videos.
That makes sense to
So
me.
like, yeah, because this one's almost an hour, and I think people would rather it be like a blue and a black video that they can click separately rather than needing to click to the middle to
Yeah,
watch
that
black.
that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's better also, I think, for algorithm things. So in a moment, after I get more
Quick break
comfortable,
and then we'll get back to it.
I'm gonna record the outro, and then we'll probably take a break. This bottle's on the ground in my camera.
It's gonna be funny. I'm gonna be like eating in every outro.
Okay, the things off the ground are no longer in the way. Okay. All right. My hair's bothering me. Okay. All right, and that concludes all of the blue cards in this chapter of the Dragon Storm Tarkir Dragon Storm set review. Yeah, well, we'll keep going. The best way to support the channel is to like, comment, and I'm going to re-record this. My brain had a little fart. We're going to give it a second shot. Okay. All right, and thank you for tuning into this chapter of the Tarkir Limited set review. We're having a good time, chunking along. The best way you can support the channel and all of these fun things we're doing is liking, commenting, and subscribing on this video, sharing it, all things that, help the algorithm. Thank you, Ryan, for being here. I'm going to let Ryan to advertise themselves a little bit, but I'm going to go ahead and plug Ryan's Patreon. I mentioned this in the last video, but I'll mention it again. I think Ryan's Patreon is like one of the best things possible when it comes to learning process, and, utilizing your time as effectively as possible to get better at Magic and, as impactfully as possible. And so, I would go hop over and subscribe to that. If you want to support me more directly, you can also do that on my Patreon. I post, deck guides, reviews, lots of little blog style posts about how I'm planning on getting better. And is there anywhere else they can find you, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky. I actually forget my handle on there. It's something to do with Ryan and Condon. So if you search those, I'm sure you'll find me.
I'll put it in the
But yeah,
description too.
yeah. Patreon is obviously a good place to reach me. I have a lot of long backlog of free articles if people want to check those out. They're pretty high level, like Magic theory articles, and so I think a lot of them will still be applicable even a long time after I wrote them. If people want to go read some of those, yeah, I do these set reviews with some partner most sets nowadays, and yeah, this has been really fun.
We'll see if it garners enough attention, then maybe we'll just have to do it every
Yeah,
set.
it'll have to be every set.
All right, we'll see you guys for the next one. All right, great. Rename blue outro. I'm gonna eat the rest of my food. This is fun. It is long,
It
but
is long. It feels weird
I
like
did the
saying the
smart thing
same
this
thing
time
on
of
every outro. So I
Yeah.
was like trying to switch it up, and then I was like, I don't know what to say.
Honestly, there's no need to. Like, people get used to hearing the same thing over and over again.
Right.
So,
No, I know you're not, like, you don't actually have to say a different thing. It's just my brain like wants to
mhm.
because I've like done it an hour ago, but that's not people's experience with it.
The way I think about the outros is like, there's gonna be some people that only watch multicolored, right? So, like, I want to make sure that our outros are in every video. But anybody that doesn't want to watch the outro can just leave right before the outro.
Exactly.
They can hear the outro and click off, and so it never bothers anybody that it's there, but it's helpful for some people.
Totally. No, it makes total sense, and like I get that all in theory. It's just weird to like sit here recording one and feel like I
Yeah.
have to like say something, but I just like don't.
Oh, yeah. The art in this set is pretty cool.
I like it. It's so refreshing to just have it be like a normal Magic set. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Not a hat set, not a
In
Universes
universe sets
Beyond
aren't
set.
getting enough love. What'd you
Yeah.
say?
It's not a hat set. It's not a Universes Beyond set. It's just
Mm-hmm.
a set. I mean,
Just
it is a
magic.
return set, I guess. Like they haven't done. Duskborn was the last like, yeah, original plane, new plane set.
Hey, we went racing last set.
It's true. Was that a new plane? Was there a new plane, or was it just literally three that we've already been? Aether Drift, I feel like, was very much a hat set. It was just people in cars.
Broom, broom.
Vroom vroom.
After how many years, they're gonna at some point need to make some number of hat sets. This set's great though. They really like. I
I'm
almost think
really
it's
excited for
unfortunate this
it.
set doesn't have a PT.
I know. I'm disappointed. Like I'm really sad I'm not going to Denver, but I'm traveling like the following weekend and it would just be too much. And also like yeah, the Spotlight series, they're so fun, but to travel for a tournament where like the best I'm going to do is just like make my money back that I spent on traveling is just like hard to justify.
I'm going to get sushi. My favorite sushi place is in Denver.
Excellent.
Also, there's just
That's a
no
good
chance I was
reason.
missing a limited GP. I'm
No,
excited.
that's completely fair. I like very much feel the same way and I'm like kind of mad at myself for missing one. But yeah,
Oh. The only unfortunate part about this light setup is that it
you're
is a
kind of
lot of
staring
bright
into
lights in
it.
my face, and
Yeah.
so it makes my eyes super tired. So I can show you. I don't know how bright it'll come off on camera, but oh, my camera's glued to my thing. Oh, I can take it off the mount. Don't mind my mess. Like the tiny bones is hiding the mess. So I have two cameras or two lights like this,
Hmm.
and they're kind of like tilted in so that you don't get. I didn't know my camera did that. Um, so that you don't see like a reflection really.
Right.
Um, and I feel like I mean you see it if it goes in my glasses, but like it doesn't make the like little dots in your eyes like ring lights and stuff do.
Yeah.
It just feels a little more
No,
subtle, I
it's a good
guess.
setup. I think you have it well executed. Anyway.
I'm gonna move it soon, so I need to fix this wall first of all. But also like I want to have a nice background, and my desk is I think a little too close to the wall to really do anything fun back here. So I'm gonna just move it a little
Yeah.
further out probably. I also just like I feel very in a corner when I'm in this
It's weird. It
like
doesn't look very different from your
this
old
is the wall.
setup. Yeah.
So the only difference between the old setup is that like I have less space to move back.
Right.
The other one was like a little nook that I was built into. Also I now have more monitors set up and a wall to like my left, so it feels like I'm like really trapped.
Yeah.
But all
Anyway,
right.
we should probably yeah keep going. It's going to be a long one, especially like multicolor. I think is going to be longer than any individual color. So and
Yes.
there's colorless and there's lands on top of that. Yeah.
Yeah, there is also like if we get through black, red, and green, I know we started late, it's my fault. But if we get through like black, red, and green and you need a break, none of these are posting until like
Right.
if I post
I kind of do just want to
multicolor.
get through all of them, and like I can stay up however late we need to do that. It's just
Okay,
I want to get through
sounds good to
them
me. I
today.
just
Yeah,
if you wanted to do it when we did rares or something, that'd
I
be
appreciate it.
an option as well.
Yeah.
We'll see how we're doing by the time we get there.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Time for an intro. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the next rendition of the Tarkir Dragonstorm limited set review. If you have not yet seen the signposts at the beginning, or white or blue, I would go back and watch those first so it's cohesive. But if you just want to learn about black, that's what we're here to do today. I have an absolutely lovely guest that I'm having a wonderful time talking about Magic cards with. Ryan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Ryan. I'm one of Nicole's Sanctum teammates. We've prepped for multiple pro tournaments together and drafted a ton together. And I think always talking with Nicole about Limited is super, super fun. And so thought we would do it together this time for the set review.
Having a great time. So, these are long. We're going to hop right into it. And it looks like we're starting with a banger. Our first card for the day is Worthy Cost. They print one of these in just about every set, but they've got little minor changes. It is 1 black for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice a creature to exile target creature or planeswalker. Now, these are always pretty good at baseline. I don't think they're ever really lower than a 4 unless like black really sucks or something. However, this one I think is better than the ones that they have printed in the last couple of sets for a couple of reasons. One, the text sacrifice a creature. Black is in the like Mardu color scheme, which is the tokens like mobilize colors. And so, you're not going to need to sacrifice something useful. You can sacrifice a token that's just going to be sacrificed in the end step anyway, which is pretty cool. And it also exiles. There was 1 or 2 cards we've talked about throughout the rest of the set review where we're like, oh, if the removal in this set exiles, this card's a little worse. Exiling is always better than destroying. With Harmonize and Renew and all these mechanics that do things out of the graveyard, it being able to exile is definitely an upside. So I think, this card's going to get a solid probably 2 or 3, depending on, rares and stuff. How do you feel?
I think I might go a little bit lower than that. Mobilize, it's really good with, but one of the better aspects of removal is being able to clear out blockers before you get in, and this doesn't exactly do that if you're mobilizing with it. Endure is kind of nice. You can make a 1/1 spirit and sack that, but that is sacrificing a real permanent creature. This kind of effect, I think, can really vary in how well enabled it is in different formats. But I also think that you usually don't have to draft it higher than most cards, because if you're in the right space for it, it will be a premium card in your deck and will be kind of unplayable in a lot of other people's decks. So, I would maybe go with like a 5 or something for this. It's a really high upside common that you can make incredibly strong with like building a deck around it. But I don't think I would be picking it like as a premium removal spell sort of inherently. It's possible that it just ends up being that because there's like so many ways to enable it kind of trivially. I'm going to start out a little bit lower on it and assume that you sort of have to really try to make it work. And then in that case, it's more like a card that you can speculate on early, or you can pick later in drafts as sort of a reward for being in a certain space.
Yeah, I guess the reason I'm also a little higher on it is we've gone through 2 colors and we've entered into black, and we have not yet found a non-conditional removal spell.
That's true.
And so, 1 mana exile. It
gets the thing
either way,
even
it'll
better
be playable,
than
and you'll know when it works and when it doesn't.
For sure. Next card is Caustic Exhale. It is a single black, kind of, you'll see, for an instant. And as an additional cost to cast it, you either behold a dragon or pay 1. So it's really like 1 in a black, and then if you have a dragon, it's just 1 mana. And the effect is target creature gets -3/-3 until end of turn. So it's a last gasp for people who remember that card. And then it costs 1 mana if you have a dragon. Really good. Good removal spell. I mean, does it kill big creatures?
I didn't read the additional cost right away, and I was like, 1 mana -3/-3, what's happening?
Yeah, right. It's a weird way they templated it, where it's not like you can reveal a dragon and then it costs 1 less. It's like, yeah, it costs more or you reveal a dragon, which, yeah, same thing, but weird templating. I mean, this is a very good removal spell. It's not unconditional. It doesn't kill whatever you want. So I'd put it like around the same grade, like maybe a 4, maybe slightly better, just because it's a little bit less conditional. What do you think?
Yeah, around 4 or 5 is where I would put this card. And I think it being non-conditional is the reason that I don't even remember what it was called. The final vengeance of the set is why I put the other card a little higher. But yeah, it's a totally serviceable removal spell. You're happy to take it. take them pretty high to make sure you have removal in your deck. And yeah, I think you're happy to have this Magic the Gathering card. All right. So this is our black devotee, Abzan devotee. 1 and a black for a 2/1. It filters for Abzan colors. And then it's got 2 and a black, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. I think out of all of the ones we've looked at so far, on Instinct, this one is the one that I'm the least excited about. It doesn't even really block. And you can get it back, but I don't know if you want your mana filtering to need to be, 5 mana to get it back from the graveyard and cast it. If you need it for filtering, it's going to be a totally playable card, and filtering is going to be important in the set, so I'm not going to put it, too low, but I think it's probably, if I put the other ones at, 4s and 5s, I think this one's probably a 6. It's, notably worse than the other ones.
Yeah, I very much agree. You don't want to get this card into combat because you need to use the fixing, on curve most of the time. And it's also just a bad blocker. Not being able to block a 1/1 mobilize token is really rough. I think it's going to be in this format. And yeah, these kinds of cards, like we saw with Deathless Pilot, returning themselves to your hand, it's not something that you're going to want to spend your mana on until the very late game most of the time. Um, it's sort of nice that your fixer can be you have access to it whenever you want to some extent, and if you really have a card that you really want to cast, you can spend the 3 mana, spend the 2 mana recasting this, and then the following turn cast your green card, right? But yeah, I totally agree. This is one of the least exciting fixers, probably the least exciting one we've seen at least. So I'm good with a 6, maybe even a 7 for this. The
Yeah,
card itself is not a card I'm excited to put in my deck. So I want to be using the fixing, and even then I'm kind of paying cost for it. So I think at best this is an average common.
I agree.
Next creature, we have Unburied Earth Carver. 1 in a black for a 2/2 human warrior, and it has 2, sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature. Again, another card that works really well with Mobilize, shocker. Yeah, this gets free 2 mana add a counter essentially with your Mobilize stuff. Pretty strong. I mean, the 2 mana 2/2 as a baseline is not that good, but it doesn't take that much work to make it totally fine. And I think this ability is just enough to make this card a card that is going to be relevant enough early, and then very annoying for your opponent to deal with in some games when they've had to remove your other creatures, and then this is just left over in a 4/4 or a 5/5 and only getting bigger. I like this card. I don't love it, but I think it's a good common.
Yeah, I think it's 7.5-ish is around where I put it. These cards are always better in sets when there is not a lot of trample. We haven't touched green yet, so how much trample we don't super know. But a lot of the time, these cards are better when you can block with something and then sacrifice it to get a counter. And so we do also have Mobilize, which is an additional thing you can do with it in this set. But that's one of the cool things. And if there's not a lot of trample, this card's always a little bit better. I'd say I'm putting it around a 7.5 if I had to guess.
Yeah, I'm right there. I would say a 7 maybe. I'm slightly higher, but not that much.
All right. Our next card is Delta Bloodflies. This is 1 and a black for a 1/2 flying insect. Whenever this creature attacks, if you control a creature with a counter on it, each opponent loses 1 life. Okay, so black, green, and Abzan both touch counters with, and then
Yeah.
I guess also the renew mechanic. So there's a good amount of things that touch counters, but a 2 mana 1/2 flyer is not particularly exciting.
And this is even still
This is
worse than a 2 mana
fine.
2/2 flyer most of the time, even if you are enabling it, which a 2 mana 2/2 flyer is nothing incredible. It's just fine, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not excited about this card. It'll be pretty easy to enable, I think, but I don't think the payoff is really worth it.
Yeah, I think you might have some of these end up in your decks, if you need 2 drops or something. We haven't seen a whole lot of crazy 2 drops or anything. And if you put counters on it, that makes it better too because it is a flyer. So it is a good card to put counters on.
That's true,
Um,
actually. Yeah, one
that's
counter
actually I
on
think a
this
big
makes
part
it
of this
a
card. I think it
totally
probably is around
different
a
card.
7.
Yeah, that like if there's lots of ways to put a single counter on this for like not that high of a cost, then I think it becomes a lot better. So that's a good observation. Yeah, I think like 7, like average common, maybe slightly worse than that, honestly, for me, just because I don't want to
Yeah.
need to put something on it to like make it good. But it's not ever actively horrible if you have any amount of counters in your deck. Like it'll be fine.
Yeah,
Just
exactly.
won't ever be great. Next, Alicia's Legacy. One in a black. For an instant, this is black's combat trick. Target creature you control gains death touch and indestructible until end of turn. Really simple. This isn't this a strict downgrade on overdrive, maximum overdrive from Aether Drift?
Yeah,
Didn't
because
that
that put
just
a counter on
do
it.
this and give a counter? Yeah, I'm not super high on this, but like it kind of does the same thing. Like it's plays all the same roles as a card. It's sort of a pseudo removal spell. It's a combat trick that'll win almost every combat. That can be valuable, but I think this is you don't need to ever prioritize this super highly in a draft. I'm going to give this like an 8 probably.
Yeah, 8/9, a card
Yeah,
I don't take super highly. A lot of the time I'll pick one of these up during a draft really late just to have one in my pool in case I need like a 23rd card or something.
good sideboard
But
card.
I was never very excited to play Maximum Overdrive, which is a better card. I'm just never very excited to play cards like this. But the art is cool.
Agreed. Yeah, art's cool. Alicia's a cool character.
Yeah. All right, we have Kintree Nurturer. This is a 2/1 lifelink creature for 3 mana. When this creature enters, it endures 1, so you can either put a counter on it, so it's either a 3/2 lifelink or you get a 1/1 white spirit. Cards like this that make 2 bodies are typically totally average. They, can be a little bigger. Lifelink is nice because the 2/1 ends up being a good blocker. But you can also get like a 3/2 creature, which is pretty good versus mobilize. A 3/2 with lifelink, seems like it'll be pretty well positioned. This seems like
That
a
really punishes them for mobilizing, I think. Yeah, that's a
yeah, this
good
seems like a pretty
interaction.
average common that I'm, happy enough to have as filler in my deck. Probably like a 7 would be my guess.
Exactly average common for me. Yeah, right around a 7. Totally agree.
All right.
Next card is Nightblade Brigade. 2 and a black for a 1/3 Death Touch and Mobilize 1. And when it enters, Surveil 1. It's kind of funny. Like the Surveil doesn't feel like it really has anything to do with the rest of the card, but it seems like they kind of added it on to just cover all of the black synergy spaces. Um, I like this card. 3 mana, 1/3 Death Touch is like pretty solid body. It's never super exciting, but it can be really annoying for your opponent to interact with in combat. Mobilize 1 is pretty nice. We've seen so many cards that work with Mobilize that just need a little bit of Mobilize to enable them. And then enters and surveils 1. I'm happy with that. Like sometimes I'll bin a relevant card. Sometimes I'll just dig to the land I need to hit my 4th land drop. Sometimes I'll get rid of a land in the late game. It's just like upside every time you cast the card. So I like this card a lot. I'd give it like a 6. I think it's like a slightly above average common.
I agree. Yeah, I like 6. It has mobilize on it, which is definitely useful. Also, they can never really block it super profitably because it has death touch. I like this card. 6 sounds good to me. All right, we have aggressive negotiations. Aggressive. 3 mana for a sorcery. Target opponent reveals their hand. You may choose a non-land card from it and exile that card. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature you control. So it's a Thoughtseize that puts a counter. It's a sorcery. It's 3 mana. These cards, I think, generally, unless they cost them well enough, don't see a lot of play in limited. Sometimes like I'll sideboard one if I know my opponent has a really big bomb or something. But that doesn't mean I'm taking it early. If I really need the counter, maybe I'm considering playing it, but even then I think it's just a little too overcosted. Like I'd rather do something else. This is probably at about a 9 for me. I just don't like these effects in limited.
I agree. Yeah, this screams sideboard card to me. It like obviously is enabling some of the counter synergy stuff, but I don't think that makes it worth playing. It's not horrible to play as like your 23rd card. You can play it. It's not, ever embarrassing, that embarrassing at least. Um, good, better card than sealed because there's more bombs to note. But like,
It
yeah,
screams.
I'm good
It's
with a
rather
nine.
aggressive. All right, no
Yep,
more negotiating.
no more. Next card is Dragon's Prey. Two and a black, and this is again this weird card. It costs two more to cast if it targets a dragon. So most of the time it costs three, but if you're killing a dragon, it costs more. And then destroy target creature. So it's literally murder, except costs five if it's targeting dragons. But murder for single black instead of double black is like pretty nice.
Especially in a set with like a lot of colors because it makes it easier to splash it, which is
Right.
always a pretty big problem with murder. I think this is
Yeah,
a
I mean,
pretty,
this seems like a sweet removal spell. It's
pretty
pretty
premier removal spell.
unconditional. Sometimes it'll cost five, and that'll be annoying because the creature you'll need to kill is a dragon. But like, I think there are enough non-dragons that like really matter in this set that this is going to be pretty much just a removal spell, and then if you need to kill a dragon with it, you can. Like, you could easily imagine this just reading two and a black, destroy target non-dragon creature. We'd like that card, I think,
Yeah.
right? And that's just this is strictly better than that. You can kill dragons with it if you need to. So, um, really good. I would definitely consider splashing this in like almost any deck if I can do it easily. I'm on like a three, maybe even a two for this. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
pretty high on it.
that's exactly where I'm at. I think that these removal spells always end up in like exactly a 3 for me, where like you take them over a lot of like decent cards, but you don't take them over like very good rares. Which I guess in my head I don't know whether that's 2 or 3, but 3
Two and a
sounds
half.
right.
Yeah.
2.5. All right, we have Sand Skitter Outrider. This is 4 mana for a 2/1 menace creature, and when this one enters, it endures 2. So it either gets 2 counters, becomes a 4/3, or you make. Oh, interesting. Okay, so it does not make 2/1/1s, it makes 1/2/2.
Yep.
I don't know if that was instinctual to me. So it's either a 2/1 and a 2/2, or a 4/3 with menace. Um, it's fine. I mean, it makes a token.
Very
It
fine. Yeah. Like average
Menace on a
common.
2/1 is not super adventurous, but I also don't really want to play a 4/3 with Menace. I think I don't really care for this card. I'd probably put it at an 8.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree. Like, even a little bit worse than an average common. Two bodies that matter for four mana can be really good in some formats. So, like, I could see it being better than that. But my instinct is to start it lower. I think I like an eight. Yeah, I agree.
I think it would be better if it made 2/1/1s.
I agree. Yes, I think Endure would definitely be better if it was formatted that way. Um, okay. Cruel Truths. Three and a black for an instant. Surveil two, then draw two cards. You lose two life. Pretty simple. Um, I think this is like generally pretty expensive for this kind of card draw, both in terms of the life and the mana. Instant speed is nice, and like there will be decks that want this card just because they want some card selection and card advantage and might have some graveyard stuff going on. But never a card you're going to have to pick highly, I don't think. I like putting it at like an eight, probably. That's where I'm
Yeah.
leaning.
I'm fine having one in my deck if I really need to, but I'd prefer not to.
Yep, exactly.
I agree. All right. We now have the Adorned Crocodile. It is a 5/3 for 5 mana. When this creature dies, make a 2/2 zombie druid creature token. And then this one has Renew for 1 mana. Exile this card from your graveyard, put a counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery.
Thragtusk, is that you?
I think this card's like fine. It makes a 2/2 when it dies. 5/3 is not like great stats on a 5 mana creature. I feel like your 5 mana creatures, you kind of want to have like better stats than this. But you know, if it gets put directly into your graveyard, a counter for 1 mana is pretty good. You know, it is useful in your graveyard. I'd probably put this at like an average common, maybe a little below, just because it's expensive and I want my expensive cards in limited to do a lot nowadays. So 7.5, maybe an 8 would be my guess.
Yeah, I super agree. Like, I'd probably put this at an eight, even though it's like totally on rate for five mana and it does a lot of nice things. But you just never have to prioritize five drops this highly in limited anymore. Um, and yeah, like it's a respectable card. You can put it in your deck, but you're just never going to want to play like four of these, so you just
Yeah,
don't need to care about it that much.
I agree.
Next card is Feral Deathgorger, five and a black for one of the Omen dragons. So the creature half is a 3/5 flying death touch. When it enters, exile up to two target cards from a single graveyard. So that notably does you can target your own graveyard and enable your like leaving graveyard stuff. And then the Omen is one and a black for a sorcery. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to one target creature. Draw a card. So that kind of plays in the other synergy space, the black green counters synergy space. Um, Combined, these effects both I think are pretty strong. Like a 3/5 flyer for six is nice. The cantrip and put a counter on something is pretty nice as well. So like, I don't know. I'm happy with this card.
It
Yeah,
works
just
well with our
like
1/2 flyer.
it does. It does. Yeah, that's a pretty nice curve. I'd give this like a 6.5, maybe a slightly better than average common.
Yeah, I agree. I like that.
I'm also just noting that the three and a white 3/4 that exiled cards from earlier, if that exiles cards from any graveyard, then there's also that thing where you can exile cards from your own. Even though it's not in the Sultai space, there will probably be interactions with that, so just look out for that.
Yeah.
All right,
All right. Our next card
uncommons.
is Desperate Measures. They've been making a lot of instants kind of similar to this recently. It's one black for an instant. Target creature gets +1/-1 until end of turn. When it dies under your control this turn, draw two cards. So there's a couple of things that I think make this really interesting in this set. Um, One, it's like kind of a cool combat trick where like if you're exactly one power short, then you get to use it to trade the creatures off and draw cards, which is cool. But it can also be like one black, sack your token, your mobilized token, draw two cards, which is pretty cool. I think this is probably like comparative. I would say like Locust Spray was like the similar card in the last set, which if you had something that really cared about cycling, maybe you cared. This seems a little better than that if you're comparing it to that. Like it's um, there's a lot of times I think you may do this on your own creature to draw two cards, which seems pretty cool. If I put Locust Spray at a 9, I put this at an 8, maybe like a 7.5 if it ends up being, I think it's cheeky. It's one of those.
Hot take. This card's a banger. I think this
I can
card
see it.
is like basically it reads single black, draw two cards, cast this card only in the mid to late game. And then it also has the buyout option of killing a one toughness creature, which is like sweet and nice, and you'll take that sometimes, and it's like
Mhm.
great to have that on the card. But like, I can't really imagine a game of limited where there isn't some kind of trade in combat happening, and you just get to cast this opportunistically to draw two cards whenever that happens, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think this just almost reads single black, draw two cards when combat happens, which I think is just really strong, right? Like that's just a super efficient way to get card advantage.
Yeah, I definitely think the card is cool. I just don't think it'll need to be taken super highly. Um, I do think that there are probably like more specific decks that want it. I also think that like nowadays our instants and our sorceries do a lot. And you need to have like X amount of creatures in your deck. I could definitely see it being higher. I could go up to like a 6. I don't know if I think it's
Okay.
quite a 5.
I
But
don't know.
you've convinced me this
Like
card is
I
better.
think drawing two cards counts as a lot for me for one mana. Like I I don't know. I'm gonna give this card. I want to give it a 3. Um, I think this card is like really good. I'm gonna give it a 4. I'm gonna be a little bit responsible, but like this is one of the cards I might be highest on relative to consensus in the set. I think it's
Yeah.
just like a straight up a banger.
It's fun because these one mana spells in sets are either like absolutely unplayable or absolutely bangers,
Yep.
just generally, which I think is kind of cool. All
I'm
right, no more
struggling on the
desperate
side of
measures.
banger here, I will say.
I don't think we're this desperate currently. We'll have to move on.
Okay. Alchemist's Assistant. One in a black
Look at
for
this
2
monkey.
1. It's a monkey with lifelink. And it has renew, exile it from your graveyard, and put a lifelink counter on target creature, activate only as a sorcery. So, Child of Night, from people who remember that long ago in core sets, just got an upgrade, Weirdly, it's an
Wasn't Child Knight
uncommon.
in Foundations? That's not long ago.
Was it? Oh, I don't
I think so.
remember. Okay, it was
Or maybe
probably
it
in
was
like
in the
the.
Innistrad?
No, I think you're right. I think it was in like the Foundation's like deck builders toolkit thing or something. It's one of those cards that you're like, that's in standard, but it's not relevant to be in standard. Um, yeah, I mean, this card's like pretty sweet. It does your graveyard stuff in the like black and blue and green graveyard space. Uh, Lifelink counters are really nice. Like you can put them on big creatures and get huge swings in. Um, the 2/1 body, the 2/1 lifelink is just like not that impressive. I think it'll trade off for something without much value, but the card in the graveyard is like pretty nice. So I'm not super high on this. I'd put it maybe at like a 6. Where are you?
I agree. I think almost like, yeah, 6. I like 6. I think 6 is a good number. Um, I did also look into this. Child of Right has not been printed since Guilds of Ravnica. My guess is I recently drafted Iconic Masters, and that my guess is
Oh,
that's what
there
I'm
we go.
confusing because it's not Iconic Masters.
That's funny.
But that's okay. This one's not a Child of the Night. This is a monkey, so it's got to be like at least a
A
little
monkey
better.
of the day.
Monkey of the day. All right. Our enchantment of the cycle: corroding Dragonstorm. Um, playable in Esper Pixie. Who knows? It's an enchantment when this creature enchantment. When this enchantment enters, each opponent loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life, and then you surveil 2. And this one has the same text. When a dragon you control enters, return this enchantment to its owner's hand. I like this card. 2 mana, drain 2, surveil 2. Not bad. If you can pick it up and put it back down, 2 life is 1/10 of 20. And those add up quickly if you have not seen the Esper Pixie deck. And gaining 2 life, I do also think is like pretty notable and limited. And surveilling, can really help smooth out hands. I like this card. I think I would definitely play it. Probably like a 5 would be my guess.
Dude, I
5.5.
swear before you read this card, I had no idea it surveilled too. I had like totally skipped over that. So I'm learning this now and reevaluating the card as I see it. Um, I'm a little lower on it, probably. I think like you're really going to need to be able to bounce this a lot, and I think you need like a certain density of dragons to be able to put this in your deck. The effect is like almost worth a card, but it's just not quite, I don't think, worth like a card in 2 mana. Drain 2 and Surveil 2. I don't know. I don't think I'm putting this in a deck if I have like 2 dragons and like one way to bounce it. Probably.
Yeah, you need to be able to bounce it. I agree. I'm not putting this
Yeah.
in a deck where I don't have ways to bounce it. So maybe I take it a little lower then. Maybe I take it closer to a 6.
Yeah, I think I'd give it like I might even give it an 8. I'm skeptical that there's going to be a lot of decks that can enable this, but I agree there will be some decks that can, and it will be pretty sweet there. So yeah, I
I
don't know.
believe in the dragon set. It can do it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
All right.
Next card is Krumar Initiate, 1 and a black for a 2/2, and it has X and a black tap, pay X life. This creature endures X, activate only as a sorcery. That's sweet. I mean, they made
This
it
card's
expensive.
awesome.
Yeah, like paying X life is a high cost, right? Like, you know, if this just didn't pay the life, it would be broken beyond belief in limited.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, of course.
but needing to pay the life means that you sort of have to like weigh how big of a creature you're going to make. It's not just how much mana you have access to. Um, and I would say most of the time you're making a creature with this, you're not putting counters on it because like you sort of want to diversify your threats. I would say like 95% of the time people are going to be making a creature instead of putting counters on the 2/2.
Yeah, also the
Maybe if it's
card you
like
want to tap
blocking.
typically doesn't it's not
Yeah,
super useful for the card you want to tap to have counters on it.
exactly. Oh, and also right, it can't even block because activate only as a sorcery. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that the paying life is a really meaningful cost. Like you make a 5/5 with this and you pay 5 life, that's a quarter of your life total. You're likely not going to have that late in the game, or if you do, it'll be still pretty costly to pay. So, but like you can just make a 3/3 and then be like, I got a 2/2 and a 3/3 out of my card, which is pretty good, and like make more if you need to, and maybe you have some life gain. You've got like the monkey that
Mhm.
gains life. That's kind of a combo actually.
Monkey.
Um,
I
so
kind of love this
yeah,
card. I have
I
this like
like
at
it.
almost a 4 in my head. I think this card's sick.
I agree. I think it's pretty sick. You can also like make a 1/1 and then sack it to your like Final Vengeance card, right? So I agree. I think this card's really good. I guess I don't think it's like a bomb, is all I was trying to say. It's
Yeah.
probably like I think a 4, maybe a 5, maybe a 4, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, 4.5.
Strategic Betrayal. I can't remember who spoke about the last card. This is 1 in a black for a sorcery. Target opponent exiles a creature they control. Oh, okay. I did not realize this is what this card did. Target opponent exiles a creature they control, so one from the battlefield of their choice, like an edict, and their graveyard. Um, this set
With
seems
edict
like
and graveyard hate.
edicts. Yeah, this set seems like an edict is probably not great. Like edicts in limited are generally kind of awkward because you normally want them like on exactly turn 2, but now like a million of your cards enter and make a token, which makes the edict
Yeah,
also seem a little worse.
it's pretty
Maybe a
rough.
sideboard card
It's a
would
go
be my
wide
guess.
set, and like exiling their yard might trigger their stuff that says when stuff leaves the yard. I think this is probably like a trap mostly.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I'd
Like
give it like
a 9.
yeah, I think 9. Like it doesn't look like a 9 because it looks like it just does two relevant things, but I think it like secretly doesn't. I'm
It is a
happy giving this a
strategic
9.
betrayal, would you say?
It betrayed us. Oh no! Except we figured out the betrayal.
Not
Next
strategic
card.
enough.
Nope, we're better. Okay, Yathan Tomb Guard. 2 and a black for a 2/3 menace. And whenever a creature you control with a counter on it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card and lose a life. Kind of sweet. Um,
Cool.
Notably good with the insect flyer guy if you give it a counter, sort of. Um, on its own, 2/3 menace for 3 is like not good enough on rate, but it's not that far off from being good enough. And then if you get one card out of this, I think you're like, okay, fine, this card was okay. And if you get 2 cards, you're starting to be pretty happy. 3 cards, great. 5 cards, maybe you're starting to worry about your life total. But beyond that, yeah, I'm not super high on this card. I think it like takes a lot of enabling, and uh, the payoff is like fine, but not incredible. And they can just kill it if it gets out of hand. But it's solid. You really need to be in the counters deck. Where are you at with this? Yeah, I want to hear your grade
I think
before I
I'm
give mine.
probably in like about a 5.5. Like if you don't have the stuff for it, you can't value it high enough, but like now all of a sudden, I don't know, the 1/2 flyer, like this really seems like a deck that could possibly come together. There's things that really benefit off of getting the additional counters, aside from the fact that counters are pretty strong generally. And then, on top of that, you have ways to kind of refill your hand. I could see this being pretty strong. I think I see it between a 5 and a 6, depending on how the games play out, and so I'm calling it a solid 5.5.
Okay. I think I'll say a 6. I think I'm like a notch lower maybe on it than you, but like not very much. It wears counters really well. So yeah, 5, 6, somewhere in there.
I like that. Where's counters? All right. Now we have an unrooted ancestor. This is 3 mana for a 3/2 flash creature. 1 mana, sacrifice another creature. This creature gains indestructible until end of turn. Tap it. This card's cool.
Cool.
I don't. It's taken a second for the brain to like think about how it
Mobilize.
will
I'll
play.
say some words. Mobilize, endure. Yeah, it
But
does
mobilize
things.
doesn't even really like work super well because you have to sacrifice the creature that's attacking to give this thing indestructible. But if you're flashing it in, then it's not really like
Yeah, the
I
flash
guess
doesn't work
after
with
it's
either of
flashed in.
those. Yeah. The flash is just kind of like a bonus ability, I think, where like you'll get them by like sacrificing a 2/2 tapped blocker or like a non-blocker and then like ambushing their thing with this.
Yeah, this being in the
Um,
format does mean that you have to like you heard me say a lot of the time during Aether Drift Draft, like, oh, there's no entity tracker in the format. Like, I don't have to worry about a creature getting flashed in. This means, if there is a flash creature, you have to remember that. Um, I
yeah.
don't know. 6? I don't
Yeah,
think it's
I
anything
think it's like
crazy.
slightly better than your average common, but like not by a lot. Um, it's sort of a virtual 3/2 indestructible attacker in a mobilized deck, or like not in a mobilized deck, but like with a mobilized creature on the battlefield. So
Yeah,
I think that's like strong. Yeah, I think 6 probably. I'm good with that grade.
I agree.
Next card is Whale of War. 2 and a black for an instant. Choose one. Creatures target opponent controls get -1/-1 until end of turn, or return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. The one word I want to emphasize with this card is pushed. I think this is better rate than we've gotten on almost both of these kinds of effects in a while. Instant speed, their team gets -1/-1, cleans up the mobilized tokens, kind of negates an entire attack from them, can be a really nice, like, blow them out in combat trick in a certain situation. And then 3 mana for return 2 creatures from the yard is about the rate we usually see that effect printed at, with like minor bits of upside. But this can be an instant, so you can just like end of their turn, cast it, and sort of get a really good divination and like win a grindy game. This card's sweet. I think this card's like really good personally.
Yeah, it's especially nice if like, you have a removal spell, but you kind of want to hold on to it for something that's going to be like super impactful. Then, you can pass the turn and you don't have to be worried about wasting the mana because you're going to be able to like use some sort of effect anyway. I like this card. I think I probably have it between like a 4 and a 5. Just because it's like it's not the most flexible. It doesn't just kill everything, or like you need to have cards in your graveyard. So maybe now that I'm saying those things, like a 5. It's not perfect in every
I think I
situation,
give
but
it
it's
a
a
4.
cool
I think
card.
I'm going to be optimistic. I just think like the flexibility on these kinds of effects, like the first effect is good in a lot of situations against an aggro deck. Like it can sometimes just randomly blow them out if you're behind or in a more controlling deck that's kind of like falling behind on board because they played a lot of cheap, high power, low toughness creatures. And
Mhm.
then the other ability is just great in like a grindy game, which is sort of the opposite of that. So I'm pretty high on this card. I would give it like a 4. I mean, not that far from you, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. We have Venerated Storm Singer. This is 4 mana for a 3/3 with Mobilize 1. And whenever this creature or another creature you control dies, it drains your opponent for 1. I think that they did a good job not putting this card at 2 mana. Normally these drain effects on creatures are often at 2 mana, and I think in this set that would kill you way too quickly. And
Agreed.
they acknowledge that clearly in play design. It's an uncommon, so you'll see less of them, and it's a little bit more expensive. That being said, I still think this card's gonna be great. It looks, we've seen now in black several ways that like really benefit from getting the life gain. It seems like the black decks look like they're pretty good at like poking down, between flyers and counters and draining and whatever it is. And with mobilize, like sometimes you're just gonna make a lot of tokens and you're gonna be able to drain them a lot. I like this card a lot. I think this is gonna be a 4 for me. And then if the mobilize strategy ends up being something that comes together a lot, that I feel pretty good about, which is it seems pretty pushed. I could see this going up to like a 3 too. It feels like a very strong effect.
Strongly agree with everything you said. I'm very scared whenever this card hits the battlefield. That's the only thing I'm going to add.
You're the little person down here getting
Exactly,
shot.
that's me. Next card is 100 Battle Veteran. Oh, this guy's done 100 battles. That's scary. 3 and a black for a 4/2. As long as there are 3 or more different kinds of counters among creatures you control, this creature gets +2/+4, so it becomes a 6/6. And notably, I just want to restate that 3 or more different kinds of counters, not counters, but kinds of counters. So you need 3 different counters to pump this. And then you may cast this card from your graveyard. If you do, it enters with a finality counter on it. So that kind of brings you one step closer to those 3 counters because most of the time you won't have a finality counter. Um, yeah, this is an interesting card. I think it's quite good. What do you
Yeah,
think?
it seems like it's going to be good. I mean, we've seen like a couple different ways to put counters on things that aren't +1/+1 counters. Um, I think we'll probably see more in multicolor as well. And entering with a finality counter means like, the Child of Night plus a counter, or like a +1/+1 counter means that it comes back as a 6/6. And
Yeah,
even just like a 4 mana 4/2 that dies and comes back
that's
is
not
like
bad. Yeah.
is pretty good rate, I think, generally. And then, a lot of the time it's going to die and come back as a 6/6. I mean, this card
A
seems
lot of the
pretty good to
time you
me.
get to just like discard this card, right? And it's just like a free card
Yeah.
sitting in your yard. Yeah, I think this card's quite good. I'm giving it like a four, maybe.
Yeah, that's about where
Yeah,
I'm at. I agree.
sweet, sweet card.
I agree. All right. Salt Road Skirmish. This is 4 mana for a sorcery. Destroy target creature. Create 2/1/1 red warrior creature tokens. They gain haste until end of turn. Sacrifice them at the beginning of the next end step. Okay, so this is a sorcery card that says mobilize when I cast it for 2.
Yep,
Um,
exactly.
I think it's pretty good. 4 mana, removes anything. And then on top of that, like the turn that you play it, it can really push a good amount of damage with making additional tokens and they die. This card seems good to me. Like a
I
4,
would
maybe?
describe this as the only mobilized card in the set that works with the Final Vengeance. Um, it like that's a great turn five. You like
Oh, that's
kill two of
sick.
their
Yeah.
creatures and make a 1/1 attacker and just get in with everything. That's incredible. I'm gonna love setting that up. Yeah, this card is really good, I think. Slightly underrated for a removal spell, but like getting two attackers out of that kind of makes up for it. And then any synergies is just gonna go off with this. So yeah, I'm really high on it. I could even see like a three, but it's probably just too
Yeah.
expensive for that. I think a four is reasonable.
Yep, that's exactly how I felt.
Cool.
All right, we're moving on to our last black card in Gurmag Raksha. 6 mana for a 5/5 menace. When this creature enters, target creature an opponent controls gets -2/-2 until end of turn, and target creature you control gets +2/+2. We've seen, a number of these like expensive black creatures that have some sort of type of removal stapled on them, and I don't remember the last time one was bad. This one is good. It's a 5/5 with menace, which is, not bad rate on a 6 mana card. And then on top of that, it makes one of your creatures have a better attack this turn, and then, either makes one of their attacks, not great, or kills a creature. A lot of the time, I'm pretty high on this card. I think the only thing holding this back from getting super high grade is that you don't want a lot of 6 mana cards in your deck. A lot of the time, this is like it removes anything, and then I'm happy having 2 of them. But this one, I think the removal is like just a little too low of a rate to want several copies of it. And so, I'd probably put this at like a 3 if it was a great creature and removed something, but I'm probably at like a 4.5 ish on this. It is an uncommon. You're not going to see a lot of them, but I do think you're really happy to have one in your deck. I think this card's pretty cool.
Yeah, totally agree with all of that. Like, I sort of think of the ability as more a little bit of value than as a removal spell.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's going to be good, but it's not going to like actually kill something you really care about most of the time. But this is like well worth your 6 mana. I think you're happy to have it in your deck, like you said. So I like a five, maybe four and a half, five, somewhere in there.
Yeah. I think we talked a fair bit, this is kind of like a wrap up for black, but I think we talked a fair bit about white and blue, and like a lot of them felt like they were good support colors. A lot of the time black is a pretty strong support color just because of the removal that black is able to host. That being said, I think black so far looks like the strongest color we've looked at. A lot of the creatures I think are above rate. On top of that, you get the removal spells and the mechanics are strong. So far I think black looks like very strong to me. So, I guess we'll see how it ends up.
Yep, I'm super bad at like thinking about which colors are strong as I'm doing set reviews. So thank you for keeping me locked in on that. I agree. I think black in particular looks very strong here.
Yeah. Okay. So I will save this as black, and then I need to do a black outro, and then I need to pee.
Cool. I'm going to
Let's do the
go
outro first before I
lay things
forget.
down for 5 minutes. Or
Okay, stay here for a
2 minutes or
second.
however
Let us do
long.
the outro first.
Yes.
Okay. All right, and that is the end of Black for our Tarkir set review. Thank you, Ryan, for being here. One of the best ways you can support this channel is by liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing this video. Anything that kind of gets it around. I think Ryan and I are both in a place where we're having a lot of fun with this, and if it sees enough support, we'll probably try to give it another shot next set. So we'll see what happens. If you want to support Ryan has a Patreon. It's great. You can listen to my outro from any of the videos, and I'll talk about it a lot. But it really is I think one of the best resources in terms of learning process and getting better at the highest level of Magic. So I highly suggest Ryan's Patreon. They're also on Blue Sky. That'll be in the description below. And then if you want to support me directly, I also have a Patreon. There I've got deck guides, things like that. I'm sure I will spend a lot of time talking about Esper Pixie and all the cards that it possibly gets from this set. I think there's a couple cool directions you can go with that. And we'll see how it goes. We will see you guys in the next part of the limited set review. All right.
Perfect.
All right. Enjoy your face down laying.